Hello, everyone. This is Dan from CoinCrunch, and welcome to this review of Fusion, a new project coming out in the crypto finance space. So before we dive into Fusion, just want to say thank you to everyone who has been subscribing to our newsletter and to our YouTube channel, and thank you to everyone who has joined the Telegram group for CoinCrunch. We have a pretty awesome community growing in Telegram. So if you haven't joined, I really encourage you to join the Telegram group and say, hey, I'll drop a link to that in the description underneath the video. So what is Fusion? Well, Fusion is a new project coming out that has sort of flown under the radar until recently, and they have a very, very ambitious vision, which is to connect lots of different blockchains and create sort of this blockchain of blockchains, which is going to hopefully revolutionize the financial industry. Also, before we dive into the finer details here, I just want to say, as usual, this is not financial advice. This is just my opinion and the opinions of a couple of dudes who love crypto and have decided to dedicate most of our time and energy to learning about this stuff. So Fusion is similar to a few other projects that are already out there. It's an interoperability blockchain, meaning it's going to connect different blockchains, and it's mostly focused on finance. So if that sounds a lot like WanChain and ICO, it's because it's doing a lot of the same things. It's tokenizing a lot of financial assets in the real world off-chain, and it's putting them on the blockchain and letting them operate with each other, communicate value with each other, and execute different financial logic between the different chains. So, in a nutshell, Fusion establishes a public blockchain as an inclusive crypto finance platform that, by breaking the bottlenecks of interoperability and scalability, can provide complete financial functions, leading us to an exciting new era of Internet of Values. And it describes Internet of Values as sort of the new internet that the blockchain is allowing us to create, in that we're transmitting values from different parts of the world and different types of data instantaneously, almost instantaneously, anywhere around the world in a distributed, secure way, as opposed to the Internet of Information, which is sort of the internet that we have now. And you can think about the Internet of Values as sort of derived from the Internet of Things, where you have a thing that exists in the real world, and you tokenize it, or you have a sensor that records something and it somehow records that data and it puts it on a distributed ledger on a blockchain. So the key features of Fusion, these are my notes here, and just want to say that the white paper on the Fusion project is about 60 pages long, and it's pretty in-depth. And normally I recommend that everybody here does their own research. In this case, it's probably better to just watch this video, because it took me about 5 hours to read it and reread it and really fully understand what they were doing and some of the implications and the math behind it. So I've sort of distilled it down in this video to just easy to understand bits and pieces. But of course, if you really like the tech and stuff behind a lot of these projects, of course, dive into the Fusion white paper and enjoy yourself. Okay, so the key features of Fusion are that it uses distributed nodes to manage the token's private keys. And this creates a management layer across multiple blockchains. So you can think about, you have a blockchain that's like Neo, and you have another blockchain that's Ethereum, and you have another one that's Bitcoin, and you have different private keys for each of those blockchains, and you want to do some sort of smart contract between those blockchains. Well, what Fusion is claiming to build, or they're saying they're going to build, is a actual way to distribute the keys on a public blockchain, on the Fusion blockchain, in a way that keeps them secure and allows for these sort of smart contracts and interoperability functions to occur between the different blockchains. It's inclusive, meaning that it will include any blockchain that's been built to date, any blockchain that's been being built now, and then any blockchain that's going to be built in the future. So they're sort of developing it in a way that allows for future blockchains to sort of plug in. So it's like this overarching management layer that goes over all blockchains, past, present, and future. It's going to be highly scalable, and it does this in a unique way of combining proof of work and proof of stake, which we'll get to later in the video. And then they have a strong emphasis on community. So a large part of the white paper is dedicated to how they're going to grow the community and sort of the function of the Fusion Foundation, which is the company that owns the Fusion blockchain, and some of the initiatives they have to help with adoption of Fusion. Again, as I mentioned, this is similar to Icon and similar to WanChain in that it's basically finance on the blockchain. It's also similar to Aeon and Aeon's bridging architecture, which whereas Icon has sort of like, we can think of Icon as passing value between different blockchains, and Aeon might be a little more advanced in that it passes logic as well. So, if a particular event happens on blockchain A, then do this on blockchain B. So that is basically the overview of Fusion. And now let's dive into the main problem that it's trying to solve. So again, the Fusion keeps referring to this concept of the Internet of Value, and that this is the next evolution of the internet, basically. And it's going to be a big step, not just for technology, but for humanity as a whole, because we're going to be able to pass and communicate value to people anywhere in the world using blockchain technology. So the problem that the Fusion project is really trying to solve is they're creating a public chain to use the distributed nodes to control the private keys. And this will map the tokens to it, but also allow for cross-chain smart contracts. And what this does is not only allows for sort of complex financial functions to take place on the Fusion blockchain, but that sort of builds an infrastructure layer for all these other financial services to interact with. So Fusion's not trying to say, hey, banks aren't necessary, lawyers aren't necessary, legal systems aren't necessary, and countries and governments aren't necessary. We may reach a point in the distant future where those things sort of take a different shape or become more obsolete. But they're saying, as of right now, we're building an infrastructure layer that all these different services can interact with. So they're trying to help bring those off-chain services onto the Fusion blockchain as well, not just tokenizing the financial assets and putting them on the Fusion blockchain, but also allowing for these service providers to interact and use different tokens and create different smart contracts. So what they say is to achieve that overarching goal, there's sort of three key problems inside of that Fusion is trying to solve. And the first one is interoperability. So again, if you've been following along a lot of the projects like Icon and WanChain and even Chainlink, a lot of them focus on interoperability between blockchains. Not just blockchains, but also sort of off-chain data centers and other types of data that are sort of siloed and need to be brought onto the blockchain in a particular way that's easy to use and easy to access. Scalability. So scalability is a big problem for pretty much every blockchain. We've seen Ethereum having, obviously Bitcoin's had its own scaling issues lately, which seem to be getting resolved somewhat. Ethereum also has had some scaling issues and some network congestion in the past month, and will face scaling issues in the future, which the Ethereum, core developers are working hard to fix. And then, of course, it must be usable, it must be easy to use, and it must be adopted. So those are the three key problems that the Internet of Value must sort of solve if it's going to be useful and effective and sort of like implemented well. Okay, so how does Fusion sort of solve these three key problems? Well, Fusion helps connect the off-chain service providers with the underlying IOV infrastructure. So again, they're creating this sort of underlying blockchain that helps all these different blockchains connect and transmit value and logic across the different chains. So if you look at this diagram, you can see we've got data sources, could be information from the New York Stock Exchange. You've got organizations like insurance companies, and then you've got different blockchains like Bitcoin and Ethereum, and they all need to interact in a simple way, and that's where Fusion comes in. So that's the goal. So how do they solve each piece of the puzzle? To solve interoperability, Fusion, as mentioned, they're going to put the private keys for each blockchain in a set of distributed nodes. So they're going to, basically, the solution is they're going to shard the keys and store them in a lot of different nodes in a way that keeps them secure. And what they call this process distributed control rights management. So you can think of having all these crypto assets here, and through the distributed control rights management system that Fusion is developing, they get locked into the Fusion blockchain. And then once they're stored in the Fusion blockchain, which is a public chain, securely, all these different institutions and organizations and data sources can sort of have access to the values that you as a user would have, say, the amount of Bitcoins you have, the amount of Litecoins you have, or whatever. And so that's sort of how it works. And again, they're using sharding to break apart the private keys for each different blockchain, and then store them in a distributed manner, which helps keep them private and secure. And how do they solve scalability? Well, they basically provide these interfaces for the tokenization of off-chain assets and data by putting them under the management of centralized organizations. And this allows basically, real world values like stock prices or the amount of, insurance information to be stored in the blockchain. And the actual process that Fusion uses is called the hierarchical hybrid consensus mechanism. So this is another sort of like unique feature that Fusion is implementing in the project. So the same way that they're solving interoperability with this sort of like unique distributed key system, they also have, and this just to quickly, like, the actual part of this white paper that touches on interoperability is like 20 to 25 pages long in and of itself, and contains some pretty solid and like intense math. So this is a very oversimplified explanation of what they're trying to do, but they explain basically the sharding process and the algorithms behind it. Same thing with the scalability. They have this consensus mechanism, and they go in depth to all the math behind it. And I certainly can't claim to be able to understand it on a deep level, at least not in like a day's reading. But that's all to say that, just glossing over it here, it sounds pretty simple, but they give a lot of treatment to each of these concepts in the white paper. So this is what the HHCM, the consensus mechanism, looks like. And this is sort of the novel combination of proof of work and proof of stake, which I talked about in the intro. And let's just go down here, because this is sort of, this little animated GIF sort of explains it really well. So we start here, and these are all nodes in the network. And you can see that the nodes get put into groups, and then they vote. They do proof of stake sort of voting, and of the first voting process, one node wins, and then those nodes get put into the next round, the next layer, and they go through a proof of work mining operation. So it starts with proof of stake. One node wins. That's the representative node here, and then those go into proof of work, and then sort of the winning node gets added to the Fusion blockchain, and that's how it works. And what this does is, by putting them into groups, as more and more transactions happen on the Fusion blockchain here, then you can just create more groups, or you can change the size of groups. And this is essentially parallel processing on the blockchain. So if the fusion sort of vision is realized and they have hundreds of billions, or in a couple of years down the line, trillions of financial transactions taking place on the Fusion blockchain or through the Fusion blockchain, then they're going to need lots of nodes to help validate all the transactions that are going for and keep the blockchain secure. So they can essentially split apart the transactions into lots of different groups, or bigger groups or smaller groups, and that helps process all these transactions in parallel. So that's the goal here with the proof of work and proof of stake model. And then lastly, how they plan to solve usability is they're launching what's called a blockchain technology promotion movement, which is going to increase adoption of Fusion blockchain. And they didn't really go too much into depth of this idea, but they're basically saying they're planning to reach out to pretty much everybody, existing communities like universities, research institutes, enterprises, governments, etc. And they're going to try to, make the case for the Fusion blockchain, and then get different service providers to interface and use with the apps built on Fusion. And I think here the important point is the main design features here are, first, the distributed key technology, where they're basically saying, okay, you have your Bitcoin key and your Neo key, and we need to put those on a public chain in a way that's safe and secure. And that's the number one key feature that Fusion solves. And the other one is this unique scaling mechanism where they're doing parallel processing on the blockchain using a combination of proof of work and proof of stake. So that's pretty much an overview of the white paper and the tech without going into too much detail. And I just want to say, just hit the pause button real quick. We don't, at CoinCrunch, C and I, we don't really do a lot of, I guess you'd say, like fundamental analysis or like value investing analysis of these projects. I think first and foremost, we don't come from like a traditional investing background, but I think it's also worth it to mention that the crypto market is very, very irrational now. And having talked to a lot of very, very smart and very, very wealthy investors, they're not even doing fundamental analysis either. So I think going into like really crunching the numbers and looking at like traditional private equity metrics isn't actually that valuable right now. I think from a crypto ICO investing point of view, what we're looking at, which is the technology, does it make sense from a blockchain perspective? Does it need to be on the blockchain? The team and the token metrics, those are the most important things. And I think sort of what sets these reviews apart is that we take a very hard look at whether or not something needs to be on the blockchain, and does the technology make sense? And I think that is a key feature of CoinCrunch reviews that others don't have, whereas others might just focus on team and metrics. We like to begin our reviews with a sort of in-depth look at what the project is actually trying to solve, and does that make sense? Because in our minds, that makes it both an attractive investment in the short term and the long term. So looking at the team, it's a really, really all-star team. I mean, first and foremost, the founder is the founder of BitSE, who created Qtum and VeChain. His name is Dejan. I'm going to butcher this, but people always call him DJ. And he's the founder of Qtum and VeChain, which obviously have both done very, very well. And so that's right there out of the gate. You have a very well-connected, successful blockchain founder who's launching this project. And then the other co-founders here, you have a managing partner of a large crypto investing firm who is also a manager at Goldman Sachs, and has a master's in applied math. And here we have a PhD in financial math from the Shanghai University of Finance and Economics. So a really good rockstar team, a mix of traditional investors, a blockchain guy, a founder, and then a finance, academic finance guy. And if you look down to the rest of the team, they are this mix of finance, blockchain, and business that are all very experienced with a very diverse background. And what I found interesting about the team is it's not just Chinese, and it's not just, I guess you'd say, American, but it's a mix of what looks to be Middle Easterners, some Israelis, you have Europeans, you have Chinese, and then you have sort of a few Westerners on here as well. So there's a long list of sort of American, Canadian, a long list of people from diverse backgrounds here, which suggests that they sort of have cooperation from all different areas, but yeah, either working on the project or supporting the project. So the team is very, very strong. And I guess that said, let's take a quick look at the tokenomics or token economics. So the total token supply is roughly 82 million, and the total sold during the public sale is about 20.5 million. If you account for the private sale and the seed investors, it's actually closer to 50%. So that number may be a lot higher. And what we look at is, when we talk to the different ICO rating sites like ICO Bazaar, ICO Rating, and ICO Drops, and ICO Bench as well, what they all seem to know and to share by looking at all these ICO projects is that the smaller caps have higher returns, and that seems to be something that a lot of investors have picked up on. That if the cap is smaller out of the gate, then the returns are going to be much higher, which is why a very small bounty platform like Bounty 0x can do 10x in a month because it starts with a very small cap. There's a lot of room to grow. And larger projects that might have really, really good tech take a lot longer to sort of build that steam. So the total market cap looks to be about $220 million. And again, the what I call the working market cap tends to correlate more closely with the circulating market cap. So like if it's a project that has a potential $1 billion market cap based on the number of tokens that could be available, the actual market cap that people are like the market cap that sort of the token value responds to is the circulating market cap, not necessarily the larger market cap. So keep that in mind. It looks to be that based on the peg, the ETH to FSN token peg, it looks like the token value is going to be about $2.67 per FSN token, which is not ideal. You like to see it's not a ton, especially since the token supply is under 100 million. But note that people tend to have a unit bias. So if a token is priced under $1, people think of it as cheap, and people think that just because it's cheap, has a higher potential to 2, 3, 5x more quickly. So that's something to keep in mind. Also consider that VeChain hit the market at 18 cents and has done very, very well. And Qtum hit the market at $6, which has also done very well. But in terms of X gains, VeChain has done much better. And another project that just came out with sort of a higher price out of the gate was Nebulas or NAS, and that was $2 to pre-sale investors or $5. And that I just read something today that one of the former directors at Facebook called that as one of the technically most sound white papers he's ever read, and yet Nebulas has only done about 2x over on top of the $5. So you can see how it's sort of sad when you have a project that has a lot of potential and a lot of really good tech. As a crypto investor, you have to keep in mind that people have this unit biases, and that makes a big difference because your returns might be a little bit lower. As of right now, there's no distribution schedule available. There's no lockup information available. The minimum contribution for the public sale is going to be 0.1 Ethereum, and when the ICO does go live, there's a 5% bonus for the first 24 hours of contribution. Here's the breakdown of how it's going to be distributed. 10% to team, 10% to angel and seed investors, 10% for community development, which is not entirely clear, but that sounds like it might be part of their sort of promotion and adoption progress. And then they're going to be doing 10% for the private sale, 25% for the public sale, and 5% reserve. This is sort of a low amount that there's such a small amount sold during these sale phases, and the rest is locked up. But on the flip side of that, it's also really, it gets a big confidence booster to see a large chunk of the money dedicated towards marketing, because that allows their marketing team to increase the value of the token in the secondary market, which is also great for investors. So they're sort of striking a balance there, and this is all right. I mean, this isn't ideal that they're selling so little, but again, the working market cap tends to correlate to whatever is circulating, not the total. And then 30%, almost a third of the tokens, will be used to motivate the proof of work and proof of stake. It wasn't exactly clear how this is going to work, but that was the wording they used in the white paper. So here are the cons. These are sort of some things that popped up that we didn't like about the project. And before I dive into these, I just want to give a shout out to the CoinCrunch community member, Crypto Don't Kill My Vibe, which, shout out for having an awesome name. But he put together a lot of these insights on the tokenomics, and as well as these cons. So that just gives you a sense of the type of community members we have in this small but growing Telegram group. People are doing their own due diligence and sharing it with the group, which is awesome. So a few things, and these are put together by Crypto Kill My Vibe, but I totally agree with them, so I kept them in here. The process hasn't been very transparent. They haven't had a standard sort of ICO process of pre-sale, public sale, etc. And it feels somewhat rushed. So given how recent this project is and how big of a team they have, it's a little weird. And also given the scope of the project, it's weird that it's sort of happening so quickly and the sales are coming up so soon without much information about the KYC process. They say that there's sort of this community involvement thing, which isn't the same as whitelisting. I'm not sure why they chose that verbiage. Maybe it's for regulation purposes. And then, as we mentioned, beyond that KYC gripe, the overall token metrics are not ideal. We don't know the pre-sale bonuses, which can be commonly the case, but I like to see that those are at least leaked somewhere, so that we know if the pre-sale people in the pre-sale got an 80% bonus and the crowd sale doesn't get any bonus or only a 5%, then you're pretty handicapped out of the gate. Now he wrote down this, and I've heard quite a lot of people say this: oh, there's nothing on GitHub, there's no GitHub activity. Well, my understanding, having talked to people that are actually building these projects, is that stuff moves so quickly in this space where people can launch an ICO and market it very quickly, especially if they have a lot of resources and have done other ICOs, that it can be very easy to take open source code that you see on GitHub and then just copy it or fork it and build a project and rename it. So it's by not putting stuff on GitHub, a lot of people are protecting their intellectual property, and they just want to keep the project on their apps. Maybe they have different partnerships that are sort of would be given away if they release all their code. So that could be the case. It might not be the case, but I'm less concerned about code lack of activity on GitHub than I used to be. And then this note about FUD and scam. So there's been Sia mentioned to me before I made this video, he said, this fusion could be an entire scam. After reading the white paper and how much effort they put into it and sort of looking into the news about this, I'm quite confident it's not a scam. But nevertheless, it's worth mentioning because I'm sure some people that are watching this video are going to be wondering that. And basically, it looked like an article was released on Steemit basically saying this could potentially be a scam. And what happened was there was an online chat with one of the Fusion advisors, and somebody asked about one of the Fusion support team, and basically, it was a chat. Sorry, it was a chat here with one of Fusion's advisors where he was caught off guard by a person unknown to him and responded inaptly. And then people started sharing the video of the response and not the follow up. But I guess take it. It's hard to say whether or not that qualifies as a scam, but I've interacted with quite a lot of the admins and support teams in these ICOs, and almost all the time they're very professional. They're very open, And if they don't know something, they just don't know it. But I have had a few comments here and there from support teams of the ICOs where they blatantly just say something dumb, or they respond with a sort of a knee-jerk, non-professional reaction. And usually, if you smooth it over with them, it can be fine. But one option is if it's a really dumb answer, you can always take screenshots and share it with the entire crypto community, and you can end up with posts like this. It looks like also there was a situation where 41 of the community KYC, or like community registration email address, were sent to the wrong people, which has since been rectified. So they addressed this head on. You can read this. This Fusion article is published yesterday, and it looks like this is all sort of water under the bridge at this point. But again, this is not investing advice. So the last thing we want to do is promote a scam. So we'll certainly be looking more into this before doing any investing in Fusion, and I encourage you to do the same. So the roadmap, one of the benefits of the white paper is this super in-depth roadmap. So they have, despite being, I don't know, having the sense of feeling rushed for how big of a project it is, they have a very sort of in-depth roadmap, and they have a lot of milestones, both in terms of the products they're trying to build and the way they're going to make it get people to adopt and use the Fusion blockchain. So the main pieces of the roadmap here are, by the end of Q1, they're going to have all the token sales finished, and they're going to be have tested the testnet Fusion network. That's all coming up in literally just about 6 weeks. They'll have all that done. And then by the end of Q2, the mainnet will be live, that's amazing to me. It makes me think that they have a working MVP already, or that they're just moving incredibly fast with the development of this project. And also by the end of Q2, they want to have 10 billion in digital assets and contracts running and connected to Fusion. And then scaling that up into Q3, they want to have more than 100 billion stored on Fusion, and then 1 billion in actual new financial smart contracts taking place via the dApps that are built on the blockchain. So that's pretty much it. That gives you an overview of where the project's headed. And yeah, I don't know. This is definitely one we'd like to invest in. With a lot of these projects, it can happen. The way it can work is it may feel a little rough around the cuff at first, but if you keep an eye on the Telegram, things can develop, and they can sort of build and refine some of the wording and smooth over some of the issues as they go. So that's sort of what I'm hoping to see here, and hoping to get a bit more clarification on the token metrics and the sale, which we will follow up with any comments and notes in the description of the video. So that's it. If you like this, please hit subscribe. We really appreciate the support, and please sign up to the CoinCrunch newsletter, which there'll be a link to that in the description as well. We're going to be going to a lot of conferences now. We've gone to 3 conferences, soon to be 3 conferences. One coming up this weekend. I'm going to the Icon event. So there's a lot going on, and we're going to be sharing our deal flow with anybody who subscribes to the newsletter. We're going to be sharing insider tips. We're going to be sharing sort of what videos we're going to be making and when we're going to make them and publish them. So if you want all that information, you got to subscribe, like the Facebook page, and follow us on Twitter, and you can stay up to date with everything that's going on. So cheers, guys. Thanks for watching, and hope you enjoyed this review of Fusion.